That night, I had no money and no home. Just one last coat. I saw him shivering on a frozen bench and gave him my only warmth. I thought it was a nameless act of kindness until weeks later. A fleet of black cars stopped at the building where I was destroyed. The man who stepped out was him. The shock was not his wealth, but that he had been watching me long before I saved him. My name is Brooklyn Turner. I was 34 years old, and up until 48 hours ago, I had believed that if you followed the rules, the world would eventually play fair. I was Irish American, born with a stubborn chin and a tolerance for bad weather. But Milwaukee in February does not care about your heritage. It only cares about how many layers you have between your skin and the wind coming off the lake. That night, the wind was not just blowing, it was hunting. I was walking along the river edge of a park that looked more like a graveyard of frozen trees than a place for leisure. The snow was thick, packed down into hard, slippery sheets of gray ice on the walkway. Every breath I took felt like inhaling crushed glass. My lungs burned with a cold so sharp it tasted metallic. I had nowhere to go. That is not a figure of speech. Earlier that afternoon, the digital lock on my apartment door had flashed red, twice, then gone dark. My keycard had been deactivated. Inside that apartment were my clothes, my photos of my mother, and the heater I used to complain was too noisy. Now, the silence of the street was deafening. I checked my phone. It was hovering at 4% battery. The screen was cracked, a spiderweb fracture over the time which read 11 at night. I had tried to use my debit card at a 24-hour diner 3 blocks back just to buy a cup of hot water and sit inside for 10 minutes. Declined. Insufficient funds. My credit cards were maxed out or frozen by the bank. I was a senior compliance lead, a woman who used to audit million-dollar safety protocols, and I had been reduced to a net worth of 0 in less than a month. Actually, that was not true. I had one asset left. I pulled my coat tighter around me. It was a heavy, down-filled parka, charcoal gray, with a hood lined in faux fur. It was the kind of coat you bought when you expected to survive a Wisconsin winter. It was the only thing keeping my core temperature from dropping into the danger zone. It was my house now. It was my blanket. It was the only barrier between Brooklyn Turner and the void. I kept walking because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant panicking. The path wound around a cluster of oak trees, their branches stripped bare and rattling like dry bones in the gusts. The street lamps here were yellow and sickly, casting long, distorted shadows that stretched across the snow. Then I saw the shape. It was on a bench facing the river. At first glance, it looked like a pile of trash bags someone had dumped and forgotten. It was covered in a layer of fresh snow, blending into the white misery of the landscape. But then the pile moved. A shudder, a spasm. I stopped. My boots crunched loudly on the ice. The rational part of my brain, the part that had kept me alive in the corporate shark tank for 10 years, told me to keep walking. It said that I had my own problems. It said that I was one bad decision away from joining him, but my feet refused to move forward. I looked at the shape again. It was a man. He was curled into a fetal position, knees drawn up to his chest, trying to make himself as small as possible to conserve heat. He was wearing a thin flannel shirt and a torn vest that might have been warm in October. But in February, it was a death sentence. His pants were soaked through at the hems where they dragged in the slush. I walked over to him. The wind howled off the water, slapping my face, stinging my eyes. "Sir," I called out. My voice sounded thin, swallowed instantly by the gale. He did not answer. He did not move. I stepped closer, the snow crunching under my weight. I could see his face now under the dim light of the street lamp. His skin was a terrifying shade of gray, the lips almost purple. Ice crystals had formed on his eyebrows and in the stubble of his beard. He looked fragile, like something made of old paper that would crumble if you touched it too hard. I took my glove off one of the cheap wool ones I had managed to keep and touched his hand. It was freezing, not just cold, but the kind of cold that feels like stone. It was the temperature of the bench beneath him. "Sir, you have to wake up," I said, shaking his shoulder gently. "You cannot sleep here. You will not wake up." His eyelids fluttered. They were heavy, crusted with sleep and hypothermia. He looked at me, but I was not sure he was seeing me. His eyes were clouded, struggling to focus. "Help," he whispered. It was barely a sound. It was just a puff of white vapor escaping his lips. I looked around. The park was empty. The high-rise condos across the river were dark, their windows like indifferent eyes looking down on us. There was no police patrol, no ambulance. My phone was dead now. The cold had drained the last 4% while I was walking. I could not call 911. I felt a surge of panic. I checked my pockets again. A frantic, useless ritual. I had no cash. I had no food. I had nothing to give him that would stop the inevitable physics of a body losing heat faster than it could produce it. I looked at him again. He was shivering violently now. The kind of convulsions that happen right before the body gives up entirely. If I walked away, he would be dead within an hour, maybe less. I looked down at my coat. The thought hit me with the force of a physical blow. No, absolutely not. It was crazy. It was suicide. I had nowhere to sleep tonight. I was going to be walking until the sun came up, or finding a corner in a parking garage. Without this coat, I would be the one freezing. I would be the one turning blue. This coat was the last piece of dignity I owned. It was the armor that hid the fact that my shirt underneath was wrinkled and worn for 3 days straight. I looked at the man. His eyes were closing again. He was drifting away. 2 seconds. That was how long I hesitated. 1 second to mourn the warmth I was about to lose. 1 second to accept that I might die because of this. I unzipped the parka. The sound of the zipper was loud in the quiet night. As soon as the seal broke, the cold rushed in. It felt like someone had thrown a bucket of ice water over my chest. I gasped, my muscles tensing instinctively. I pulled my arms out of the sleeves. The wind bit into my sweater, a thin cashmere blend that belonged in an office, not a blizzard. It offered zero protection. "Here," I said, my teeth already starting to chatter. "Sit up. You have to sit up." I grabbed the man by the shoulders and hauled him upright. He was light, terrifyingly light, just bones and old clothes. He groaned, a sound of deep, confused pain. I worked quickly, driven by the biting cold that was now clawing at my own skin. I draped the heavy coat around his shoulders. I shoved his frozen arms into the warm sleeves. I zipped it up to his chin. The coat was big on him, swallowing his frail frame, trapping whatever heat he had left and adding its own insulation. I did not stop there. I took off the scarf I was wearing, a thick knitted gray loop I had bought 3 Christmases ago. My neck felt instantly naked, exposed to the razor-sharp air. I wrapped the scarf around his neck, tucking it in tight to seal the gap at the top of the zipper. I stepped back. The cold was unbearable. It felt like being skinned alive. My body began to shake immediately, violent tremors that started in my spine and rattled my teeth. The man blinked. The warmth was hitting him. He took a deep, ragged breath, burying his face into the faux fur of the hood. He looked up at me. His eyes were clearing. The cloudiness was receding, replaced by something sharp, something aware. He reached out a hand. It was shaking. But he grabbed my wrist. His grip was surprisingly firm for a man who had been half dead a minute ago. Why, he rasped. His voice was stronger now. I hugged my arms around my chest, trying to rub some friction into my freezing triceps. I did not have an answer. Why? Because I was an idiot. Because I was broken. And I did not want to see something else break. Because Brooklyn Turner, despite everything the world had done to her in the last month, still could not step over a body. I do not need it. I lied. The words came out in a stutter. I am going indoors soon. It was a lie so transparent it was pathetic. Standing there in a thin sweater in the middle of a snowstorm, I looked insane. The man stared at me. He did not let go of my wrist. He pulled me slightly closer, forcing me to look him in the eye. "Don't let them make you believe you are worthless," he said. The words were precise. They were not the ramblings of a delirious homeless man. They were spoken with clear, deliberate diction. He did not say thank you. He did not ask for money. He spoke to the exact wound that was bleeding inside my chest. I stared at him, stunned into silence despite the shivering. How did he know? How did he see past the frozen face of a woman who had lost everything? I pulled my wrist gently from his grip. I have to go, I managed to say. I turned around. The wind hit me full force in the chest, pushing me back. My entire upper body was screaming. My fingers were already going numb. I started walking, forcing one foot in front of the other. One step, two steps. The pain was excruciating. It was a physical assault, but as I walked, something strange happened in the back of my mind. Amidst the screaming of my nerve endings, there was a quiet, heavy sensation. It felt like the weight of a signature on a document. It felt binding. I had given away my last layer of defense, and in return, I had taken something from him, not his gratitude, but an acknowledgement. Don't let them make you believe you are worthless. I wrapped my arms tighter around myself, head down, plowing into the snow. I was going to have to run to keep my blood moving. I was going to have to find a shelter that was still open, or a heating vent, or an ATM vestibule that wasn't locked. Just before I turned the corner that would take me out of the park and onto the main avenue, I stopped. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to make sure he hadn't fallen back over. I looked back. The bench was about 50 yards away. The man was sitting upright now, encased in my charcoal gray coat. He wasn't huddled down anymore. He was sitting straight, his back against the wood slats, and he was watching me. Even through the falling snow in the distance, I could feel the weight of that gaze. It wasn't the look of a man who had just been saved. It wasn't soft or pitiful. It was steady. It was calculating. It was the look of someone who was memorizing a face, recording a data set, logging a transaction. He lifted one hand, the hand I had warmed, and held it up in the air. A silent acknowledgement. I shivered. And this time, it wasn't just from the cold. I turned the corner and ran into the freezing darkness of the city, leaving my warmth behind, unaware that I had just changed the entire trajectory of the war that was coming for me. To understand how I ended up freezing in a park with nothing but the clothes on my back, you have to understand where I was just 4 weeks earlier. I was not a woman who slept on benches. I was a woman who had heated marble floors in her master bathroom. The collapse of my life did not start with an explosion. It started with a signature in a warm, vanilla-scented kitchen. I remember the specific warmth of that Tuesday night. My husband, Derek, was pouring a bottle of Cabernet into 2 large crystal glasses. Derek Weller was 38 years old and possessed the kind of effortless charm that usually comes with a trust fund. Though he claimed to be self-made, he was a strategic consultant, a job title that was vague enough to mean everything and nothing at all. He wore cashmere sweaters that cost $600 and spoke in a soothing, confident baritone that made you feel like everything was under control. "Hey, babe, just a few things for the estate planner," he said, sliding a stack of documents across the granite island. I was chopping vegetables for a salad, my mind still half stuck on a compliance report from work. I wiped my hands on a towel and picked up a pen. "What is this again?" I asked. "Just the asset restructuring we talked about," Derek said, taking a sip of wine and leaning against the counter. "It is for tax optimization. If we move the deed to the lake house and the primary savings accounts under the trust in my name, we save about 12% on the annual liability. It is just paperwork. Brooklyn, you know I am terrible at saving the world, so let me handle saving us some money." He smiled. It was a smile that reached his eyes, crinkling the corners just enough to look genuine. I signed. I signed my name at the bottom of the page without reading the fine print. I signed the house over. I signed the savings over. I signed because I was tired, because I trusted him, and because in my mind, Derek and I were a single entity. His name was my name. His safety was my safety. I did not know then that I was effectively handing him the knife he would use to cut me out of my own life. I loved my life then, or at least, I loved the version of it I thought was real. I worked at Blackwell Harbor Utilities, or BHU. We were the invisible giants of the Midwest, managing the natural gas pipelines and electrical grids for 3 states. My title was Senior Compliance and Safety Lead. It sounds dry. I know. It sounds like the kind of job where you push paper and bore people at parties. But I loved it. I loved it because it was real. In a world of marketing spin and corporate buzzwords, safety compliance was binary. Either the pressure valve was rated for 5,000 psi, or it was not. Either the soil density could support the pylon, or it could not. If I did my job right, people went home to their families. If I missed something, things exploded. There was a holy purity to that responsibility. My boss was Miles Kincaid. He was the chief operating officer, 45 years old, with hair that was silvering at the temples in a way that looked distinguished rather than aged. Miles was a man who viewed human beings as resources, indistinguishable from coal or copper wire. He liked me because I was efficient. He hated me because I was rigid. "Brooklyn, you are the best shield this company has," he told me once during a quarterly review. "You make us bulletproof." I thought he meant I kept us safe from accidents. I realized later he meant I kept them safe from lawsuits. The beginning of the end came in the form of a file named Project Ether. It was a massive undertaking, a $180 million grid modernization initiative funded by a mix of state grants and private investors. The plan was to upgrade the aging gas infrastructure in the northern counties, replacing 60-year-old iron pipes with modern high-density polyethylene. It was the kind of project that got politicians elected and executives massive bonuses. I was reviewing the preliminary material testing reports on a Thursday afternoon. My office was on the 30th floor, overlooking the gray expanse of Lake Michigan. I had a cup of coffee that was growing cold and 3 monitors glowing with spreadsheets. I was cross-referencing the stress test results for the new piping with the vendor invoices. It was a routine check. I wanted to make sure the batch numbers matched. They did not match. I sat up straighter. I zoomed in. The certification of safety for the piping batch destined for Sector 4, a residential area with 3 elementary schools, was dated October 12th, but the manufacturing log from the supplier showed that the pipes were not even extruded until November 5th. You cannot safety test a pipe that does not exist yet. I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. I dug deeper. I pulled the raw data logs from the testing facility. They were pristine, too pristine. Real data has noise. It has minor fluctuations in temperature and pressure. These numbers were flat, perfect lines. They were looped. Someone had taken a 10-minute sample of a successful test and copy-pasted it to cover 48 hours of testing. I ran the numbers again. I checked the metadata. The author of the final report was listed as an external auditor, but the edit history showed the final approval came from an internal BHU account. I sat back in my ergonomic chair, the city of Milwaukee sprawling below me. This was not a clerical error. This was fraud, and it was dangerous fraud. If those pipes were substandard and they were installed under a neighborhood, a harsh winter freeze could crack them. Gas would leak into the soil, migrate into basements, and find a pilot light. I printed everything. I did not email it. I knew better than to leave a digital trail before I had answers. I walked straight to Miles Kincaid's office. His assistant tried to stop me, claiming he was on a conference call with New York, but I walked past her desk and knocked on the glass door. Miles looked up, annoyed, but waved me in. "This better be good." "Brooklyn," he said, muttering into his headset before taking it off. I have the board breathing down my neck about the quarterly timeline. I placed the stack of papers on his desk. I kept my voice low and steady. "We have a problem with Project Ether. Miles, the safety data for the Sector 4 piping is fabricated. The dates are impossible, and the stress metrics are looped. These pipes have not been vetted. We need to halt the shipment and initiate an immediate internal audit of the supplier." Miles looked at the papers. He did not read them. He just stared at the top sheet for a long moment, his face completely unreadable. Then he looked up at me with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Fabricated is a strong word. Brooklyn." "It is the accurate word," I said. "You cannot test a pipe before it is made." Miles sighed, leaning back in his leather chair. He tented his fingers. "Look, I know you are thorough. It is why we pay you the big bucks. But sometimes, paperwork gets backdated to streamline the bureaucratic process. The vendor probably just got lazy with the clerical side. It does not mean the steel is bad. It is plastic." "Miles," I corrected him. And it does mean the data is bad. If we put these in the ground and they fail, people die. I am not signing off on this. We need to pause. Miles stood up. He walked over to the window, turning his back to me. We are not pausing. Brooklyn, we are on a critical path. Every day of delay costs this company $50,000 in penalties. I stood my ground. I do not care about the penalties. I care about the explosion risk. If you do not authorize the audit, I will have to flag this in the federal compliance filing next week. It is my legal obligation. Miles turned around slowly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Do not make this complicated. Brooklyn, we are all on the same team here. You are tired. You have been working late. Maybe you are seeing patterns where there are just administrative hiccups. I am not hallucinating dates. Miles. He walked back to his desk and picked up the papers I had brought. He did not hand them back to me. He opened his drawer and dropped them inside, sliding it shut with a soft click. I will look into it, he said, his voice dismissing me. In the meantime, focus on the safety gear inventory for the field crews. Let the big infrastructure stuff sit for a few days. He was sidelining me. I knew it instantly. I am not going to let this sit, I said, turning to leave. Miles called after me, his voice cheerful again. Hey, Brooklyn, I stopped at the door. Yes, we are reviewing the organizational chart next month. I would hate for you to be seen as a bottleneck. It would be a shame to stall your trajectory over a clerical error. It was a threat wrapped in a performance review. I walked out of his office with my heart hammering against my ribs. That night, I went home early. I felt heavy, carrying the weight of a moral dilemma that threatened to crush my career. I needed my partner. I needed Derek. He was in the living room, watching a basketball game on the 80-inch screen. He looked up as I came in, smiling his easy smile. Hey, superstar. You look like you went 12 rounds with a bear. Rough day. I collapsed onto the sofa next to him. He smelled of expensive cologne and cedar. I leaned my head on his shoulder. It is Miles, I said. Closing my eyes, I found a massive compliance breach in the new pipeline project. Faked data, dangerous stuff. I tried to report it, and he basically told me to shut up or lose my job. I felt Derek stiffen slightly. It was subtle. Just a tensing of the muscles in his shoulder, but I felt it. What kind of breach, he asked. His tone was casual, but his eyes were not on the TV anymore. The stress tests. I said, they are fake. It is a $180 million project, Derek, and they are cutting corners on the most basic safety elements. I threatened to flag it federally. Derek shifted, pulling away from me so he could look at my face. He took my hand. Babe, listen to me. Miles is a shark. We know that. But maybe you should take a beat before you go nuclear. I frowned. What do you mean? I mean, big companies have complexities, Derek said, searching for the words. Sometimes there are bridge loans or conditional approvals that look messy from the outside but are standard practice. If you blow the whistle on a project this size, you could tank the stock price. You could hurt a lot of people's pensions. I pulled my hand away. I am talking about pipelines exploding. Derek, I am talking about safety. Since when do you care about BHU's stock price? Derek laughed nervously. I am just playing devil's advocate. I am a strategist. Remember, I look at the big picture. All I'm saying is, maybe you handle this internally. Do not make enemies you cannot afford. You know how connected the board is. I looked at him, really looked at him. There was something in his eyes that I had never seen before. A flicker of anxiety, a shadow of calculation. And then he said it. Besides, if they have to rebid the construction contracts because of a compliance hold, the operational friction alone will bankrupt the subsidiary. I froze. Operational friction. That was a specific term. It was a term Miles used in executive meetings. It was a term used in the internal risk assessment documents that I had access to. But the general public did not. It was not a phrase you threw around casually unless you had read the project charter. How do you know about the bidding structure for the subsidiary? I asked. My voice was very quiet. Derek blinked. He realized he had slipped. He recovered quickly, reaching for his wine glass. Oh, you know, I read the industry newsletters. Energy sector stuff is all the same. He took a sip of wine, but his hand was shaking just a tiny bit. I stood up. I felt a cold dread settling in my stomach, far colder than the winter wind outside. I looked at the man I had signed my house over to. I looked at the man who slept in my bed. You do not read industry newsletters. Derek, I said, you read spy novels and golf magazines. I am just trying to protect you. Brooklyn, he snapped, his voice losing its soothing quality. You get so obsessive. You think you are the only one with morals. Just drop it. For us. For us. I walked into the kitchen, my sanctuary, but it felt like a trap now. The warmth of the heated floors felt cloying, suffocating. I looked at the stainless steel appliances, the granite countertops, the life I had built. I realized then that I was not standing on solid ground. I was standing on a trapdoor. I just did not know who had their hand on the lever. The next morning, my calendar was empty. The weekly safety review meeting had been canceled. My access to the shared drive for Project Ether was denied. I sat in my office, watching the gray waves of the lake crash against the shore 30 stories down, and I knew the war had started. I just didn't realize that the enemy was not just down the hall. He was also sleeping in my bed. The digital clock on my dashboard read 2:14 in the afternoon when I pulled into my driveway. It was a Tuesday, a time when I should have been 70 miles away at a substation in Kenosha inspecting safety valves. But at 10 that morning, my entire schedule had been wiped clean. The site manager had called, citing a sudden permit issue, and told me not to come. When I tried to reschedule, my access to the booking system was grayed out. It was strange. It was clumsy, but in my naivety, I thought it was just administrative incompetence. I thought it was a chance to go home early, maybe cook a real dinner. Maybe actually talk to Derek about the Cold War that had started in our living room the night before. I walked up the front steps of my house. The driveway was empty because Derek usually parked his Audi in the garage, and I had left mine on the street. I reached for my keys, but then I stopped. The front door was unlatched. It wasn't open, just resting against the frame, leaving a sliver of darkness visible. A draft was pulling the cold winter air into the hallway. I felt a sudden spike of adrenaline. My first thought was not betrayal. It was burglary. We lived in a good neighborhood, but people left doors open by accident, and opportunities were taken. I pushed the door open slowly. I didn't call out. I stepped onto the hardwood floor of the foyer, listening. The house should have been silent. Derek should have been at his co-working space downtown, strategizing his way through whatever vague consulting contracts he held. But the house was not silent. There was a sound coming from the kitchen. It was low, rhythmic, and terrifyingly domestic. It was the sound of a knife chopping on a wooden board, and under that, the murmur of voices. Soft, intimate, the kind of low-frequency rumble that only exists between two people who have stopped guarding their words. And then there was the smell. My house usually smelled of lemon polish and the faint, earthy scent of the potted ferns I kept by the window. Today, it smelled like a department store perfume counter. It was a heavy, cloying scent of tuberose and musk. It was expensive, aggressive, and completely alien to my life. I walked down the hallway. My boots made no sound on the runner rug. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. I reached the archway that led to the open-plan kitchen. I stopped. Derek was standing at the island. He was wearing his gray cashmere sweater, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He was opening a bottle of wine, our wine, a vintage Pinot Noir we had been saving for an anniversary. He looked relaxed. He looked happy. He looked younger than he had when he looked at me the night before. Sitting on the bar stool across from him, holding a glass that was already half empty, was Celine Voss. I knew Celine. Everyone at Blackwell Harbor Utilities knew Celine. She was the director of communications, a 36-year-old shark with a smile that could freeze water. She was the woman who spun oil leaks into minor containment events and safety violations into proactive infrastructure updates. She was beautiful in a sharp, manufactured way, all sleek angles and tailored silk. We had eaten lunch together in the cafeteria. She had asked me about my garden. Now she was in my kitchen, wearing a silk blouse that was unbuttoned one button too low, watching my husband with a familiarity that made my stomach turn over. Derek laughed at something she said, a free, easy sound I hadn't heard in months. He poured the wine into her glass, his hand lingering near hers on the stem. I stood there for exactly one heartbeat. In that second, the world tilted on its axis. The furniture, the walls, the light fixtures, they all looked the same, but they were suddenly props on a stage where a tragedy was being performed. "Derek," I said. The word was not a scream, it was just a noun, but it hit the room like a grenade. Derek spun around. The wine bottle clanked against the granite counter, nearly tipping over. His face went through a rapid, fascinating transformation. Shock, panic, and then, terrifyingly fast, a smooth, practiced mask of calm. Celine did not jump. She did not spill her wine. She turned her head slowly, her eyes locking onto mine. There was no guilt in her expression. There was only a mild annoyance, like I was a waiter who had brought the wrong order. "Brooklyn," Derek said. His voice was steady, too steady. "You are home early." I looked at him. I looked at the wine. I looked at Celine. "I am," I said. My voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from inside a tunnel. The inspection was canceled. "But I guess you knew that." Derek put the bottle down. He wiped his hands on a dish towel. He did not move toward me. He stayed on his side of the island, using the granite as a fortification. "Babe, listen," he started, holding up a hand. "You are misunderstanding the situation. Celine and I were just reviewing some strategy. She needed an outside perspective on a crisis management plan. And since I consult stop, I said, I stepped fully into the kitchen. The smell of the tuberose was suffocating now. It was in my throat. Do not insult me. Derek. Do not stand in our kitchen, drinking our wine, with the woman who runs PR for my company, and tell me this is a meeting." Celine took a sip of her wine. She set the glass down with a delicate click. She turned her body on the stool to face me fully. She crossed her legs. "It is a meeting." "Brooklyn," Celine said. Her voice was like cool syrup, but we were also celebrating. "Derek has been very helpful to the firm lately, more helpful than you." Honestly, the audacity took my breath away. She was not apologizing. She was critiquing my performance. "What are you doing here?" Celine, I asked, my voice trembling with a rage I was struggling to contain. "I am here because Derek invited me," she said simply. I looked at Derek. He flinched under my gaze. He looked at Celine, then back at me. And I saw the calculation in his eyes. He realized he couldn't play the innocent husband anymore. So he decided to play the victim. "This is exactly what I was talking about last night." "Brooklyn," Derek said, his voice gaining a hard, defensive edge. "You come in here, aggressive, accusatory. You are always like this lately. Paranoid. Obsessive." I stared at him. "I am paranoid. You are cheating on me in our kitchen. It is not just about this," he shouted, slamming his hand on the counter. "It is about you. You are never here mentally. Even when you are home, you are buried in compliance logs. You are hunting for problems that do not exist. You are bringing stress into this house like a disease." I needed someone who actually listens to me, someone who understands the reality of the world, not just your rigid little rulebook. I felt like I had been slapped. He was rewriting reality in real time. He was taking his betrayal and painting it as the natural consequence of my work ethic. "You are sleeping with her because I work too hard?" I asked, incredulous. "That is your defense. I am with her because she appreciates the big picture." Derek spat. "She doesn't try to blow up a $180 million project just to prove a point about a plastic pipe date." The room went dead silent. The air seemed to be sucked out of the kitchen. I had never mentioned the specific value of Project Ether to Derek. I had mentioned a big project. I had never mentioned the plastic pipes. I had never mentioned the specific nature of the fraud. I looked at Celine. She was smiling. It was a small, tight smile of triumph. I looked at Derek. He realized his mistake instantly. His face went pale. He tried to backtrack, opening his mouth to stammer an excuse, but it was too late. The puzzle pieces slammed together in my mind with the force of a car crash. The industry newsletters, the knowledge about the subsidiary bidding, the advice to go easy on the company, the canceled schedule today. "You are not just sleeping with her," I whispered. My voice broke. "You are working with them." I looked at Celine. "You sent him here. You sent him to marry me." "No, that's crazy. We have been married for 3 years." Celine laughed softly. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Oh, honey, no. We are not that forward-thinking. Derek and I reconnected about 6 months ago, right around the time Miles started worrying about your promotion. He knew you were a dog with a bone. He needed a leash. Derek was available, and he was very concerned about his financial future. I felt sick, physically sick. My husband, the man I loved, had been turned into a handler. He had been spying on me for half a year. Every time I vented about work, every time I mentioned a suspicion, he was feeding it back to Miles and Celine. You sold me out. I said to Derek. Tears were stinging my eyes, but they were tears of fury, not sorrow. You sold your wife for what? A consulting retainer. It is for us, Derek pleaded, his logic fracturing. Brooklyn, you don't understand. BHU is going to crush you. If you go against Miles on this ether thing, they will destroy you. I was trying to manage it. I was trying to get you to back down so we could keep the lifestyle we have. I did this to save you from yourself. You did this to pay for the car, I said, pointing at the window. You did this because you are weak. I turned to Celine. Get out of my house, I said. Celine stood up. She smoothed her silk skirt. She picked up her purse from the counter. I am leaving, she said, but not because you ordered me to. I am leaving because my work here is done. She walked past me. As she passed, she leaned in close. I could smell the wine on her breath mixed with that cloying perfume. You should have just signed the papers. Brooklyn, she whispered, you really don't know who you are playing with. Miles isn't just a COO. He is a firewall, and you are just a glitch. She walked out the front door, the click of her heels echoing like gunshots. I was left alone in the kitchen with Derek. He looked small. He looked pathetic. Brooklyn. Wait, he started, reaching for me. Don't, I said. I stepped back. Don't touch me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a harsh, jarring vibration against my hip. I pulled it out. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped it. The screen lit up with a notification. It was a text message from Miles Kincaid. I stared at the words. Please report to HR tomorrow morning at 0800 a.m. Bring your badge and any company devices. We have a serious matter to discuss regarding a breach of data privacy. I looked up at Derek. He was watching me, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not fear of me, fear of what was happening to me. They are moving, he whispered. I looked at the text again. Breach of data privacy. They weren't just firing me, they were framing me. I looked at the man I had trusted with my life. You knew. I said, you knew this was coming today. That is why you wanted me out of the house. That is why you thought I would be gone until 6. Derek didn't answer. He didn't have to. I turned around and walked out of the kitchen. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't grab a coat, not yet. I just needed air. I walked out the front door, leaving it wide open behind me, leaving Derek standing in the wreckage of our marriage, surrounded by the smell of another woman's perfume and the silence of a life that had just ended in 30 seconds. I stood on the driveway, the winter wind biting through my blazer, and I realized that the cold I felt wasn't from the weather. It was the chill of a target painted on my back. The next morning, the sun rose over Milwaukee with a deceptive brilliance. It was a bright, crisp Wednesday, the kind of day that usually signaled productivity and momentum. But as I walked into the glass-walled conference room on the 4th floor, the human resources containment zone, I knew I was walking into an execution. I was exactly 3 minutes early. I had dressed in my sharpest navy blazer and a white silk blouse, a suit of armor for a battle I had already lost. I did not go to my office first. The badge reader at the elevator bank had flashed a solid, unforgiving red when I tried to swipe for the 30th floor. A security guard, a man named Thomas, whom I had bought coffee for every Christmas for 5 years, had stepped forward. He did not look me in the eye. He just pressed the button for the 4th floor and rode up with me in silence. His presence a quiet confirmation that I was now a threat. Inside the conference room, Janet, the director of human resources, was waiting. She was a woman who had built a career on the ability to deliver devastating news with the emotional resonance of a dial tone. Beside her sat a man I did not know, wearing a cheap suit and typing on a laptop. "Legal. Sit down." "Brooklyn," Janet said. She did not offer me water. There were no notepads. The table was bare except for a single, thick manila folder. I sat. My hands were folded in my lap to hide the fact that my knuckles were white. "Am I being fired?" I asked. I saw no point in dancing around the edge of the grave. Janet opened the folder. She slid a piece of paper across the polished mahogany. It was not a termination letter. It was a notice of internal investigation regarding corporate espionage and hostile workplace conduct. The words floated before my eyes. Absurd and terrifying. "We have received credible evidence that you have been leaking proprietary data regarding Project Ether to competitor firms," Janet said, her voice smooth. "Furthermore, we have multiple witness statements alleging a pattern of harassment against colleagues, specifically aimed at destabilizing the leadership team." I laughed. It was a short, sharp sound that bounced off the glass walls. "Harassment?" I asked. "I am the one who found the fraud." "Janet, I am the one who flagged the safety violations. You are twisting this." Janet tapped the folder. "We have the logs." "Brooklyn." She pulled out a stack of printouts. They were emails. My emails. Sent from my account. With my signature. Time-stamped 3 days ago. I pulled them closer, my eyes scanning the text. They were addressed to a private contractor I had never heard of, offering detailed schematics of the pipeline expansion in exchange for a consultation fee. "This is fake," I said, looking up. "I never wrote this. The syntax is wrong. I do not use these abbreviations. The IT department has verified the metadata." The legal counsel spoke up for the first time. His voice was bored. "The login originated from your laptop, using your biometric clearance, at 11:30 at night on Sunday." I stared at the paper. Sunday night. I had been asleep. I felt a chill go through me. Derek knew my passwords. Derek sometimes used my laptop to check sports scores while I was showering. And then, the door opened. Miles Kincaid walked in. He did not look like the villain I knew he was. He looked weary. He looked like a disappointed father. He was carrying a cardboard box, the universal symbol of corporate exile. "Brooklyn," he said, sighing heavily as he placed the box on the table. "I tried to stop this. I really did." I looked at him, and for a second, I admired the sheer commitment to the performance. "You did not try to stop this." "Miles," I said, my voice shaking with repressed rage. "You orchestrated this. You and Celine, and my husband." Janet stiffened. "We are aware of your personal grievances with Ms. Voss." Brooklyn, attacking her character during a disciplinary hearing, only supports the hostile workplace allegations. "Ms. Voss has filed a formal complaint regarding your behavior yesterday. She states you threatened her." "I threatened her," I repeated, incredulous. "She was in my kitchen with my husband Miles." Shook his head sadly. "See? This instability, it is exactly what the team has been worried about. The stress of the project was too much for you. You started seeing conspiracies. You started lashing out. And then, to sell data. It is a tragedy." He looked me in the eye, and there it was. Behind the mask of concern, deep in his pupils, was a glint of pure, unadulterated victory. He was telling me, without speaking a word, that he had won. He had taken my integrity, my work, and my sanity, and he had twisted them until I looked like the criminal. "We are terminating your employment effective immediately for cause," Janet announced. "The cause means your severance package is void. Your stock options are forfeited, and given the severity of the data breach, BHU reserves the right to pursue civil litigation." They were stripping me, not just of my job, but of my financial future. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, like they were filled with lead. I want my personal effects, I said. Miles nudged the cardboard box forward. We packed it for you. Security reasons. You are not permitted to return to the 30th floor. I looked into the box. A framed photo of my mother, a dead succulent, a stapler. My notebooks, the ones where I kept my real observations, were missing. My journals. I said, "Where are my journals?" "Company property," the lawyer said. "They contain sensitive information." I looked at them. The triumvirate of my destruction. "You will not get away with this," I said. It was the cliché line of every defeated protagonist, but I had nothing else left to say. Miles smiled. A thin, tight expression. "We already have. Brooklyn. Please hand over your badge and phone." I placed my badge on the table. I placed the company phone next to it. I felt lighter. But in the terrifying way an astronaut feels lighter when the tether snaps, Thomas, the security guard, was waiting at the door. He escorted me out. The walk to the lobby felt like a funeral procession. The elevator ride was silent. When the doors opened on the ground floor, the lobby was busy. It was the morning rush. People were swiping in, grabbing coffee, chatting about their weekends. As I walked past the reception desk, clutching my pathetic cardboard box, the noise level dropped. I saw heads turn. I saw people whispering behind their hands. "That is her." I heard someone say, "The one who went crazy." I heard she threw a wine glass at the PR director. I heard she was selling secrets to the Chinese. The rumors had moved faster than fiber optics. Celine had been busy. In less than 12 hours, she had rewritten my entire history at this company. I was no longer the respected compliance lead. I was the unstable, jealous woman who had imploded. I saw Celine standing near the coffee cart. She was wearing a soft pink sweater, looking vulnerable and brave. She was talking to a group of junior analysts. When she saw me, she flinched, actually flinched, as if I were about to attack her. The analysts glared at me protectively. I kept walking. I pushed through the revolving doors and stepped out into the biting wind of the Milwaukee street. I did not cry. I was too shocked to cry. I walked to the parking garage. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, just staring at the concrete wall. My hands were shaking uncontrollably now. I needed a plan. I needed a job. I was Brooklyn Turner. I had a master's degree. I had 10 years of flawless experience. One firing, even a bad one, could not erase that. I pulled out my personal cell phone. I dialed Michael, a headhunter I had worked with for years. He had tried to poach me 3 times in the last decade. "Michael, it is Brooklyn," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I am on the market." There was a long pause on the other end. "Brooklyn," Michael said. His voice was awkward. "Look, I saw the bulletin." "What bulletin?" BHU sent out a notice to the regional industry group this morning. "Standard security alert regarding compromised personnel. They flagged you for corporate espionage. Brooklyn. They CC'd everyone. The gas companies, the grid operators, even the consulting firms." My stomach dropped. They had salted the earth. "Michael, that is a lie. I was framed. I believe you." "Maybe," Michael said, "but I cannot sell you. You are radioactive. No one is going to touch a compliance officer with an espionage flag. You need a lawyer, not a recruiter. Good luck." He hung up. I called 3 other contacts. 2 went straight to voicemail. The third, a woman I had mentored, answered only to tell me she couldn't be seen talking to me and hung up. I was blacklisted. In the span of a morning. My career had been deleted. I drove home. I had nowhere else to go. The house, the beautiful, treacherous house, was the only shelter I had left. When I walked in, Derek was there. He was sitting at the dining room table. The surface was covered in papers. He was not drinking wine today. He was drinking sparkling water. He looked fresh, clean, and utterly composed. There was a large suitcase standing by the door. It was mine. "What is this?" I asked, pointing to the bag. "We need to make this clean," Derek said. He did not look at me. He looked at the papers. "I have drafted a separation agreement. It is generous, considering the circumstances. Considering the circumstances, I dropped my box on the floor. The glass on my mother's photo frame cracked. You cheated on me, you conspired to get me fired, and you have just lost your income and are facing potential litigation. Derek countered calmly. You are a liability. Brooklyn, this marriage, it is not an asset anymore. He slid a document toward me. I signed the lease on the apartment downtown for you. First month is paid. After that, you are on your own. But you need to sign this. It waives any claim to the house, the cars, and the shared investments. I looked at him. I remembered the night I signed the tax optimization papers. I remembered him saying, "Let me handle saving us some money. The trust." I whispered, "You moved everything into the trust, which I control as the primary trustee." Derek said, "You are a beneficiary." Sure, but beneficiaries can be removed if they are deemed financially irresponsible, or if they are under criminal investigation, which you are. He had planned this. He had planned this months ago. The affair with Celine was just the perk. The real affair was with the money. I am not signing that. I said, "Then you leave with nothing," Derek said. He checked his watch. "Actually, you leave with nothing either way, but if you sign, I will give you $5,000 cash to get settled. If you do not, I cancel your supplementary card right now." He pulled out his phone. "Do it," I said. Derek looked surprised. "What cancel it?" I spat. "I would rather freeze than take a penny from you." Derek shrugged. He tapped his screen. "Done?" I grabbed the suitcase. I did not look at the papers. I did not look at the kitchen where I had cooked 1,000 meals. I looked at Derek one last time. "You think you have won," I said. "You think because you have the house and the job and the girl. You have won. I have won." "Brooklyn," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Look at you. You are unemployed, broke, and alone. I am sitting in a $2 million house. That is what winning looks like." I walked out. I threw the suitcase into the trunk of my car. I got in and turned the key. The engine sputtered. It clicked. It died. I tried again. Nothing. I looked at the dashboard. The anti-theft light was blinking rapidly. I got out and opened the hood, though I knew nothing about cars, but I didn't need to be a mechanic to see it. The main fuse block had been pulled. The battery cables were loosened. Derek was watching from the window. He held up a set of keys. His keys. The Audi was leased in his name, technically, legally. I was stealing it. He had disabled it remotely or physically before I got there. I was stranded. I grabbed the handle of my suitcase. I started walking. I walked out of the subdivision, past the manicured lawns and the heated driveways. The wind was picking up. The sky was turning a dark, bruised purple. A storm was coming. I checked my phone. I had $40 in my Venmo account. My bank accounts were joint. Derek would have drained them or frozen them by now. I had the cash in my wallet, maybe $60, $100. That was the sum total of my life. I walked to the nearest bus stop. I sat on the cold metal bench, waiting for the number 14 bus that would take me downtown. I sat there for an hour. The bus didn't come. My phone rang. It was my landlord, the management company of the apartment Derek claimed to have rented. "Ms. Turner," the voice said, "we have had a cancellation on the lease application for the unit on 4th Street. The payment method was declined." Derek, he had set up the apartment just to wave it in my face, and then canceled the payment the moment I walked out the door. It was a final, petty twist of the knife. I hung up. I was homeless. The snow started to fall. Light flakes at first, then heavy, wet clumps. I pulled my coat tighter, the charcoal gray parka that was still new, still warm. I didn't know then that this coat was the only thing I would have left to trade. I just knew that the city of Milwaukee, which I had helped power and protect for a decade, had turned into a tomb, and I was walking through it alone, while the people who destroyed me were toasting with my wine in my warm kitchen. I stood up and began to walk toward the river. I didn't have a destination. I just knew I couldn't stop moving. If I stopped, the reality would catch up to me, and I wasn't ready to face it. Not yet. I did not go back to the park to get my coat. That coat was gone, a sunk cost in the economy of survival. I went back because, in a city of nearly 600,000 people, the man shivering on that bench was the only person who did not look at me like I was a criminal or a failure. I found a rhythm to my new, hollowed-out life by day. I sat in the public library, using the free internet to apply for jobs that I knew I would not get. I typed cover letters that felt like apologies. By night, when the library closed and the shelters filled up, I walked. I had sold a pair of diamond earrings, the last gift Derek had given me before the affair began, at a pawn shop for $300. It was a pathetic fraction of their value, but it bought me a week at a grimy motel on the edge of town and enough cheap diner coffee to keep my blood moving. 3 nights after I gave him the coat, I returned to the bench. The cold was less aggressive that night, or maybe I was just getting used to being numb. He was there. He was sitting upright, wearing my charcoal parka. It looked ridiculous on him, the tailored waist bunching around his thick layers of rags, but he looked warm, or at least, alive. I sat down on the other end of the bench. I placed a paper cup between us. "Hot chocolate," I said. "Extra whipped cream." He looked at the cup, then at me. His face was cleaner than before. The grime was still there, but his eyes were bright, piercingly blue under the hood. "You should save your money, girl," he said. His voice was gravel, rough from years of shouting against the wind, or maybe just silence. I shrugged. "I am celebrating. I made it through another day without punching anyone." He smiled. It was a small, crooked thing that revealed a history of missed dental appointments, but it was genuine. He took the cup. His hands were wrapped in the gloves I had brought him the night before, mismatched wool ones I had found in a donation bin. "I am Everett," he said. He did not offer a last name. He did not offer a handshake. In our world, the world of the street last names were dangerous. They were tethers to a past that usually didn't want you back. I started, then hesitated. I didn't want to say my name. My name was currently being dragged through the mud on industry forums and internal memos. He took a sip of the chocolate. "I know who you are. You are the girl who gives away coats in a blizzard. That is the only title that matters out here." We sat in silence for a long time. It wasn't the awkward silence of an elevator ride. It was the companionable silence of 2 shipwrecks drifting in the same ocean. Over the next week, the bench became my confessional. I told Everett things I had never told my therapist. I told him about the house with the heated floors that felt like a museum. I told him about Derek, about the way he used to look at me like I was the sun, and how that look had slowly, imperceptibly shifted until I was just an obstacle blocking his light. I told him about Blackwell Harbor Utilities. I told him about the pipes. It wasn't just a mistake. "Everett," I said one night, staring at the frozen river, "it was malicious. They looped the data. I saw the timestamps." Everett was peeling an orange I had brought him. He stopped. He looked at me with a sudden, sharp intensity. "Looped?" how he asked. "Like a copy-paste error." "No," I said. "I kicked at a chunk of ice. It was sophisticated. They masked the metadata, but they got lazy with the server logs. The upload time for the stress test was 3 milliseconds after the file creation time. You cannot upload a 10-gigabyte dataset in 3 milliseconds, not on their servers." Everett nodded slowly. He didn't look confused. He didn't look like a man who spent his days collecting cans. He looked like he was processing a complex equation, and the signature he asked, "Who signed off on the batch release?" "The vice president of operations." I said, "Digital or wet?" I turned to look at him. That was a specific question, a very specific question for a homeless man to ask. "Digital," I said slowly. "Encrypted key," Everett hummed, a low, dissatisfied sound. "Digital keys are easy to borrow if you know where the IT guy keeps his backups, but a wet signature that takes nerve." He looked at me. "So, they pinned the leak on you." How I sighed, my breath pluming in the air. "They said I emailed the schematics to a competitor. They had logs from my laptop. But you didn't do it," he stated. It wasn't a question. No, I was asleep. Or I paused. I was arguing with Derek. Everett finished peeling the orange. He handed me half. "The husband," he said. "He had access." Yes. And he has a background in what tech strategy? I said bitterly. Which apparently means knowing how to ruin your wife's life. Everett ate a segment of the orange. He chewed thoughtfully. You know, he said, looking up at the dark skyline of the city. People think power is about money, or titles, or the corner office with the view of the lake. But it isn't. What is it then, I asked. It is about who holds the eraser. Everett said, the eraser. The ability to remove mistakes, he explained. Your boss, this Miles character you talk about, he thinks he has the eraser. He thinks he can edit the reality of what happened to those pipes. He thinks he can delete you. He did delete me. I said, I am gone. I am a ghost. Everett turned to me. The hood of my parka cast a shadow over his face, but I could see the glint in his eyes. It was cold, hard, and terrifyingly intelligent. No, he said softly. You are not deleted. You are just misplaced. And the thing about powerful men, girl, is that they are arrogant. They always leave a crumb. They always think they are smarter than the machine. He leaned in closer. Tell me about the audit trail, he commanded. Not the one they showed you, the one you saw first, the raw data. Where did it route through? I blinked. Why are you asking me this? Humor me, he said. It went through the tertiary server in the basement. I said, my memory kicking in, the backup archive. They thought no one checked it because it is slow. And the vendor, Everett asked, the one who supposedly made the pipes. Did you check their incorporation papers? I shook my head. No, I didn't have time. Everett nodded. Check them. What? Check the vendor, he said. If your husband is a strategy consultant, and he suddenly has money to buy new cars and lease apartments, that money has to come from somewhere. Strategy is just a fancy word for moving pieces around. Find out where the pieces came from. I stared at him. For a moment, the illusion of the homeless man vanished completely. He wasn't Everett, the guy who slept on a bench. He was a general commanding a battlefield. Who are you? I whispered. He leaned back, the mask slipping back into place. He gave me a toothless grin. I am just a guy wearing a lady's coat, he said. But I used to have a house, and I used to have employees, and I know that when a man gets greedy, he gets sloppy. He pointed a gloved finger at me. The more powerful the person, the more they fear one thing. He said, not prison, not God. They fear a paper trail, because paper does not forget, paper does not get tired, and paper does not sign a separation agreement. The words hit me like a physical blow. Paper does not sign a separation agreement. I stood up. My heart was hammering in my chest. I have to go. I said. Everett nodded. Go, and bring me a bagel tomorrow. Onion. I ran back to my car, which I had managed to get running after watching 3 YouTube tutorials and using a pair of pliers I found on the sidewalk to reconnect the battery. I drove to the 24-hour copy center where I had rented a small locker. I didn't have the BHU servers anymore. I didn't have my laptop, but I had my phone, and before they had wiped it remotely, before they had escorted me out, I had done one thing. It was a habit, a paranoia born of 10 years in compliance. I had taken photos, not of the documents, that would trigger the security software. I had taken photos of my screen, blurry, angled photos of the spreadsheets, the raw data, the chat logs where Miles had told me to drop it. I sat on the floor of the copy center, spreading out the few printed images I had managed to salvage before my cloud account was locked. I looked at the box of truth I was assembling. It was pathetic. A few scraps of paper, a timeline drawn on a napkin, a printed bank statement Derek had left on the counter months ago. But Everett was right. I looked at the bank statement. It was a transfer to a shell company called Apex Strategic Solutions. The address was a P.O. box in Delaware. I pulled up the public registry for Delaware corporations on the copy center's computer. It cost me $10 to access the file, $10 I needed for food. I searched for the pipe vendor. North Star Industrial. I cross-referenced the registered agents. North Star Industrial was owned by a holding company. That holding company was managed by a firm called Apex Strategic Solutions. I felt the air leave my lungs. Derek wasn't just consulting. He was the middleman. He had set up the shell company to launder the money from the fake pipes. Miles authorized the purchase of non-existent goods. The money went to North Star. North Star paid Apex, and Apex paid Derek, and Derek bought a new Audi. It was a circle, a perfect, closed loop of corruption. And I had been the only person standing in the middle of it. I needed to tell Everett. I needed to show him. He would know what to do next. He would know how to use this. The next night, I drove to the park. I was vibrating with energy. I had a bag of onion bagels and a thermos of hot coffee. I had the printouts tucked into my coat pocket. I walked down the path, the snow crunching loudly under my boots. "Everett," I called out as I approached the bench. "You were right. It is a shell game. I found the ice stopped. The bench was empty. My charcoal coat was not there. The pile of rags was not there. I looked around. The park was deserted. The wind whistled through the bare branches. Everett." I checked behind the bench. I checked the bushes. Nothing. Panic started to rise in my throat. Had he frozen? Had the police moved him? Had he died? Then I saw it. Tucked into the slats of the wooden bench, weighed down by a heavy stone, was a piece of paper. It was a napkin, the kind from the diner where I bought his coffee. I picked it up. The handwriting was not the scrawl of a man with frozen fingers. It was elegant, sharp, and precise. It was the handwriting of a man who used fountain pens. "Don't come here tomorrow. They are looking for you. Keep the box safe. We will talk soon." I stared at the note. "They are looking for you." He knew. He knew I was finding things. He knew they knew. I looked around the dark park, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was alone. I felt watched. The shadows seemed to stretch toward me. I shoved the note into my pocket. I grabbed the bag of bagels, and I ran. I ran back to my car, locking the doors the second I was inside. My hands were shaking as I put the key in the ignition. Who was he? Who was Everett? Homeless men do not leave warning notes in perfect cursive. Homeless men do not know about digital signatures in shell companies. And homeless men do not vanish into thin air right when the heat gets turned up. I looked at the empty passenger seat where I had imagined him sitting, explaining his master plan. I drove away from the park, checking my rearview mirror every 10 seconds. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing: I wasn't just fighting for my reputation anymore. I was fighting a war. And the general I had just recruited was a ghost, but he had left me with a weapon. He had told me to look for the paper trail, and I had found it. Now, I just had to survive long enough to use it. Survival has a way of erasing your pride. It sands it down, layer by layer, until you are smooth and raw and willing to do things the old version of you would have found impossible. 2 weeks after Everett vanished, I was no longer Brooklyn Turner, the executive who worried about pipeline compliance. I was Brooklyn, the employee of Dash Courier Services, a gig economy app that paid $12 an hour plus tips to ferry legal documents across the city. It was humiliating. Yes, but it was money. And money meant I could keep the heater on in the motel room where I was currently hoarding my box of evidence like a paranoid squirrel. I should have checked the address on the order. That was the first rule of survival: look before you leap. But I had been tired. I had been up until 4 a.m. staring at the shell company documents Everett had pointed me toward, trying to find the link that would turn a suspicion into a conviction. So when the app pinged at 7 a.m. with a priority rush job, I just hit accept. I picked up the heavy box of legal filings from a firm on the east side. The destination address was familiar: 300 West Wisconsin Avenue. I knew the address. I knew the zip code. I knew the exact air pressure of the revolving doors. It was Blackwell Harbor Utilities. I sat in my car, the Audi that I had stolen back from my own driveway, now hiding under a layer of road salt, and stared at the glass tower. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I could cancel. I could drive away, but the cancellation fee was $50. That was 3 days of food. I pulled my baseball cap down low. I wrapped a thick scarf around the lower half of my face. I told myself it was just a lobby drop. I would walk in, hand the box to the reception desk, get the digital signature, and vanish. I would be a ghost. I parked around the corner to avoid the security cameras in the main garage. I hefted the box, which weighed about 20 pounds, and walked toward the building that used to be my kingdom. The wind was brutal, whipping around the skyscrapers, but inside the lobby, the air was still and smelled of expensive coffee and floor wax. It was the smell of my old life. I kept my head down. I walked fast. The marble floor clicked under my boots. Cheap winter boots, not the Italian leather heels I used to wear. I approached the front desk. The receptionist was new, a young girl with bright red lipstick who didn't know me. Thank God. Delivery for legal, I mumbled, my voice muffled by the scarf. She didn't even look up from her screen. Just leave it on the counter. I need to scan the barcode. I lifted the box. My arms were shaking, partly from the weight, partly from the adrenaline of being behind enemy lines. I set it down. She scanned it with a bored beep. You are good to go, she said. I turned around. I had done it. I was 5 steps away from freedom, and then I heard the voice. It wasn't a shout. It was a laugh, a bright, sharp, crystalline laugh that cut through the low hum of the lobby like a scalpel. Oh, stop it. Derek, you are terrible. I froze. My feet simply refused to lift from the floor. It was a physical reaction, a somatic response to a trauma trigger. I looked toward the elevators. The golden doors were sliding open. 3 people were walking out. Celine Voss was in the center. She was wearing a cream-colored wool coat that probably cost more than my car. She looked radiant, glowing with the kind of health that only money and victory can buy. To her left was Miles Kincaid, looking serious and important in a charcoal suit. And to her right was Derek, my husband. He looked different. He had a new haircut. Shorter, sharper. He was wearing a new watch. He looked like a man who had shed a heavy weight and was finally running at full speed. I should have run. I should have sprinted for the revolving doors, but I was paralyzed. I was staring at them, the triumvirate of my destruction, looking so happy, so normal. Celine's eyes scanned the lobby. She was a PR woman. She was trained to read a room. Her gaze swept over the security guard, over the receptionist, over the courier standing near the exit in a dirty parka and a baseball cap. Her eyes moved past me. Then they stopped. They snapped back. I saw the recognition hit her face. It wasn't fear. It was delight. It was the look of a cat that has just found a mouse with a broken leg. She tapped Derek on the arm. She pointed. "Oh my God," she said, her voice pitched perfectly to carry across the cavernous space. "Is that Brooklyn?" The lobby went silent. It was the morning rush hour. There were probably 50 people in the space analysts, engineers, secretaries, executives waiting for coffee. They all stopped. They all looked. I pulled my cap down, turning my back. Brooklyn Celine called out, "Do not run off. We were just talking about you." She began to walk toward me. The click of her heels was a rhythmic countdown. I turned slowly. There was no point in hiding. The humiliation was already happening. I just had to endure it. I pulled the scarf down from my face. "Hello? Celine," I said. My voice was raspy. Celine stopped 3 feet away from me. She looked me up and down, taking in the faded jeans, the bulky men's coat, the courier scanner clipped to my belt. "Wow," she said. She put a hand to her chest in mock sympathy. "I heard you were having trouble finding a placement. But a courier really?" She turned to the crowd that was gathering. It was subtle, but people were forming a circle. Phones were coming out. I saw the lenses. I saw the red recording lights. "I mean, it is honest work," Celine continued, her voice dripping with poison. "It is just a bit of a step down from senior compliance lead. Isn't it? From managing millions to managing what is in the box. Toner cartridges." Laughter. A ripple of it went through the crowd. It was nervous laughter, cruel laughter. "I am working, Celine," I said, keeping my chin up. "Something you would not understand unless it involves lying on your back." The crowd gasped. Celine's smile didn't waver. She stepped closer. "Oh, honey, you are still so angry. That is exactly what Miles was saying. You are unstable. Miles stepped forward. He put a hand on Celine's shoulder, a protective gesture that made me want to vomit. He looked at me with that same disappointed father look he had used in the HR meeting. "Brooklyn," he said, his voice deep and projecting authority. "Please, do not make a scene. We know you are struggling. If you need help, psychiatric help, the company's insurance policy has a grace period. We can get you a number." He was doing it again. He was painting me as the crazy ex-employee. He was invalidating my entire existence. I am not crazy. "Miles," I said, "I am just broke. Because you stole my career." Miles shook his head sadly. "See, paranoia. It is a tragedy, really, to see such a bright mind snap under pressure." And then Derek stepped up. He didn't look at me with pity. He looked at me with annoyance. He looked at me like I was a stain on his new lapel. "Just go." "Brooklyn," Derek said. He pulled his wallet out. He opened it. He pulled out a $20 bill. "Here, take this. Get yourself some lunch. You look like you have not eaten in a week." He held the bill out to me. The silence in the lobby was deafening. He was offering me charity. He was offering me money from the bank account that used to be ours. He was reducing our 10-year relationship, our marriage, our life, to a $20 tip. I stared at the money. "Take it," Derek urged, shaking the bill slightly. "Do not be proud. You are delivering boxes. You obviously need it." I looked at his face. I saw the fear behind the arrogance. He wanted me gone. He wanted to buy my disappearance for $20. I reached out. I took the bill. Derek smiled, a smug, satisfied relaxation of his shoulders. I crumpled the bill in my hand. And then I threw it in his face. It bounced off his nose and fluttered to the marble floor. "I don't want your money." "Derek," I said, my voice shaking, "I want my life back." Derek's face hardened. "You have no life." "Brooklyn," he snapped, his voice echoing off the glass walls. "You are a loser. You lost. Look at you. You are standing in the lobby of the company you tried to destroy, begging for scraps. You are pathetic." He pointed a finger at my face. "You are nothing. Do you hear me? You are a zero." The words hung in the air. I felt them land on me like physical blows. I felt the heat of the tears stinging my eyes. I felt the shame burning my cheeks. I looked around. The phones were all raised. They were recording my destruction. This video would be online in an hour. Crazy ex-employee melts down at BHU. I was trapped. I was small. I was surrounded by the glass walls of the empire that had rejected me. I took a step back. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me whole. And then, the sound changed. It started as a low rumble, a vibration that I could feel through the soles of my boots. Then it grew louder. It was the sound of engines, big engines. Outside the floor-to-ceiling glass windows of the lobby, the street traffic had stopped. A motorcade had arrived. It wasn't a police convoy. It was a fleet of 4 black SUVs. They were massive, armored, with tinted windows that looked like obsidian. They pulled up to the curb with military precision, blocking the entire entrance to the building. The lobby went quiet. The laughter stopped. The phones lowered slightly. This was not normal. BHU had executives, sure, but they drove Mercedes sedans. They didn't travel in motorcades. This was the kind of arrival reserved for heads of state, or people who owned heads of state. Miles frowned. He looked at the security guard. "Are we expecting someone?" he asked. The guard shook his head, looking nervous. "No, sir. No appointments." The doors of the lead SUV opened. 2 men stepped out. They were huge, wearing earpieces and suits that cost more than my entire education. They didn't look at the building. They scanned the street. They secured the perimeter. Then, the second SUV opened. The driver hurried around to the back door. He opened it. The air in the lobby seemed to change pressure. Everyone was watching. Even Celine had stopped smiling. A leg stepped out, pressed trousers, a polished shoe. Then the man emerged. He was tall. He was wearing a navy blue wool coat with the collar turned up. He had silver hair that caught the weak winter sun. He carried himself not with arrogance, but with the terrifying gravity of a planet. I blinked. My breath caught in my throat. I knew that walk. I had seen that walk shuffle across a park on icy pavement. I had seen that walk stumble toward a bench. But I had also seen the underlying structure of it, the posture. The man turned toward the glass doors. He adjusted his cufflinks. He looked through the glass. He wasn't looking at Miles. He wasn't looking at the security guard. He was looking straight at me. My heart stopped. It was Everett. But it wasn't the Everett who ate onion bagels. It wasn't the Everett who wore my old scarf. This was a man who looked like he could buy the entire city of Milwaukee and fire it. He walked toward the revolving doors, the security guards at the entrance, who usually stopped anyone without a badge, practically leaped out of the way. They didn't know who he was, but they knew power when they saw it. He pushed through the door. The sound of the wind cut out as the glass sealed behind him. He stepped into the warm lobby. The silence was absolute. Not a phone clicked, not a whisper. Miles Kincaid stepped forward. He was the COO. It was his job to greet VIPs. He put on his best corporate smile, though I could see the sweat beading on his forehead. He smoothed his tie. "Sir," he said, walking toward Everett with his hand extended. "I am Miles Kincaid, Chief Operating Officer. I was not aware we had a visit scheduled from corporate, or Everett didn't stop. He didn't slow down. He didn't even look at Miles. He walked past him as if Miles were a potted plant. Miles was left with his hand extended in the air, grasping at nothing. Everett walked straight into the center of the circle. He walked straight to where I was standing, trembling in my courier uniform. He stopped 2 feet in front of me. He looked at my face. He looked at the tears I was trying to hold back. He looked at the crumpled $20 bill on the floor. Then, slowly, deliberately, he unbuttoned his navy wool coat. Underneath, he was wearing a pristine charcoal suit, but he wasn't reaching for a wallet. He took the coat off. The entire lobby watched, mesmerizingly confused. Everett Halden, the man who had just stepped out of a motorcade, folded his expensive coat over his arm. "You look cold." "Brooklyn," he said. His voice was not the rasp of a homeless man. It was a rich, baritone command. He draped the coat over my shoulders. It was heavy. It was warm. It smelled of cedar and power. "I gave you a coat once," I whispered. "I felt like I was in a dream." "I know," he said softly, "and it saved my life. Now, let me return the favor." He turned around. He didn't move away from me. He stood next to me, shoulder to shoulder, facing the room. He faced Celine, who had gone pale. He faced Derek, whose mouth was hanging open. He faced Miles, who had turned around and was looking at us with a dawning, horrific realization. Everett looked at the crowd. He looked at the phones that were still recording. "Keep filming," he said. His voice carried to the back of the room without shouting. "You will want to keep a record of this." He pointed a finger at Miles. "You asked if you were expecting a visit, Mr. Kincaid," Everett said. Miles stammered. "Yes. Usually the board notifies us I am not the board." Everett cut him off. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a badge. It wasn't a visitor badge. It was a black card with a gold chip, the highest level of clearance, the kind of clearance that didn't just open doors. It owned the building. "I am the owner of the holding trust that purchased this company 30 years ago." Everett said, "I am the reason you have a job, and I am the reason you are about to lose it." He turned to Derek. "And you," Everett said. His voice dropped to a temperature that made the winter outside seem tropical. Derek took a step back. "I don't work here." "No," Everett said. "You don't. But you worked on my wife." He placed a hand on my shoulder. It was a heavy, grounding weight. "This woman," Everett announced to the silent lobby, "is the only person in this entire city who treated me like a human being when she thought I had nothing to offer her. She passed the test that every single one of you failed." He looked at Celine. "You called her a runner," Everett asked. Celine couldn't speak. She just shook her head, her eyes wide with terror. Everett smiled. It was a terrifying smile. "She is not a runner. As of this morning, she is my personal proxy, which means," he paused for effect, which means she is your boss. Everett looked down at me. He winked, a tiny, almost imperceptible wink. Shall we go upstairs? Brooklyn, he asked. We have a meeting, and I believe you know the way to the 30th floor better than anyone. I looked at Derek. He looked like he was about to faint. I looked at Miles. He looked like a dead man walking. I pulled Everett's coat tighter around me. I took a deep breath. Yes, sir, I said. I believe I do. We walked toward the elevators. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. No one laughed. No one whispered. As the elevator doors closed, shutting out the sight of my husband's terrified face, I realized two things. First, I wasn't cold anymore. And second, the war wasn't over. It had just become a slaughter. The elevator doors did not close immediately. Just as the metal panels began to slide shut, a hand thrust out to stop them. It was not Miles. It was not Derek. It was a man I recognized from the oil paintings that hung in the executive corridor on the 30th floor, Arthur Pendleton, the chairman of the board. He was out of breath. He was a man of 60 who usually moved with the slow deliberation of a glacier, but he had clearly sprinted from the private elevators in the rear of the building. Behind him were 3 other board members, their faces pale, their composure shattered. Mr. Halden, Arthur gasped, straightening his tie. We were not informed. The security desk just radioed that a code-black motorcade was at the entrance. We would have prepared the suite. The name hung in the air like smoke. Halden. I froze inside the warmth of the wool coat. The name Everett was common enough, but Everett Halden was a myth. He was the founder of the Apex Group, the parent capital fund that had acquired Blackwell Harbor Utilities 2 decades ago. He was a ghost story we told interns, the man who built the infrastructure grid of the Midwest and then vanished into a life of reclusive philanthropy. He wasn't just a billionaire, he was the architect of the industry I had dedicated my life to, and I had given him a bagel. Everett, Mr. Halden, did not step out of the elevator. He stood in the center of the car, his hand still resting lightly on my shoulder, blocking the door from closing with his sheer presence. He looked at the chairman of the board with a mixture of boredom and disappointment. I did not want the suite. Arthur, Everett said. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of a gavel striking a sounding block. I wanted to see the lobby. I wanted to see how my company treats its people when the cameras are off. He gestured with his free hand toward the scene we had just left, Miles standing like a statue, Celine trembling, and the crowd of employees still holding their phones. And I have seen enough. Everett finished. Miles pushed his way to the front of the group, desperate to regain control of the narrative. Mr. Halden, please, Miles said, his voice pitching higher than usual. This is a misunderstanding. This woman, Ms. Turner, she is a terminated employee who was causing a disturbance. We were handling the security risk. She is mentally unstable. Everett turned his head slowly. The movement was predatory. He looked at Miles, then he looked at me. He didn't ask me if I was unstable. He didn't ask me if I was causing a scene. He looked at my eyes, checking my pupils, checking my breathing, assessing me like a field medic assessing a soldier. You are still standing, he said to me, quietly. Good. Then he turned back to the room. He stepped forward. Just one step, crossing the threshold of the elevator back into the lobby view. Unstable, Everett repeated. He laughed. It was a dry, terrifying sound. You call her unstable because she found the cracks in your foundation. Miles, you call her a risk because she refused to look away. Everett swept his arm out, pointing directly at me. This woman is the only person in this entire building, the only person in this entire city who saved me when I was nothing. The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavy enough to crush bone. When I was freezing on a bench, when I looked like garbage, when I had nothing to offer but a burden, she gave me the coat off her back. Everett continued, his voice rising in intensity. She didn't ask for a tax write-off. She didn't ask for a promotion. She just saw a human being in pain. And she acted. He looked at the board members, his eyes blazing with a cold fire. I have spent 40 years building this company on the principles of service and integrity, and in 5 minutes, I watched a courier girl show more integrity than my entire executive suite combined. Celine made a small, choking sound. She looked like she wanted to faint, but she was too terrified to move. She realized, in that second, that her entire career, her PR spins, her manipulation, her charm was useless against this kind of power. But it was Derek who made the mistake. Derek, my husband, the strategist, the man who thought he could talk his way out of anything, stepped forward. He adjusted his jacket. He put on his reasonable man face. He thought he saw an opening. He thought this was a negotiation. "Mr. Halden," Derek said, his voice smooth but shaking slightly at the edges. "I understand you are grateful. It is a touching story, but there are personal complexities here you are not aware of. I am her husband. I know her mental state better than anyone. We are currently going through a separation because Everett cut him off. He didn't shout. He just held up a hand, and Derek's voice died in his throat. Everett stepped closer to Derek. He invaded his personal space, towering over him. The difference in their stature wasn't physical. It was existential. Derek was a man who played games. Everett was the man who built the stadium. "You are her husband?" Everett asked softly. Derek nodded, forcing a smile. "Yes, and as her husband, I am trying to protect her from no." Everett said. The word was simple, final. "You are not her husband." Everett said. "You forfeited that title when you sold her out for a lease on an Audi." Derek's face went white. The mention of the car, the specific detail of his bribery, hit him like a physical slap. He stepped back, stumbling slightly. "I know about Apex, Derek," Everett said, lowering his voice so only the inner circle could hear. But the menace was loud enough for everyone. "I know about the shell company. I know about the kickbacks. I know you thought you were clever, hiding behind a wife you considered naive." Everett leaned in, his face inches from Derek's. "You are not her partner. You are her Achilles heel. You are the weak point she trusted, and you used that trust to stab her." Everett straightened up, dusting off his lapel as if talking to Derek had made him dirty. "But the thing about an Achilles heel, Derek, is that once you identify it, you can armor it, and she is armored now." He turned his back on Derek. He didn't wait for a response. He treated Derek like he no longer existed. Everett looked at the chairman. Arthur, initiate a code red lockout on all executive servers. No one leaves the building. No data leaves the building." "I am convening an emergency audit committee in the boardroom in 10 minutes. Arthur nodded frantically. "Yes, Mr. Halden, immediately." Everett turned back to me. He held out his arm, indicating the open elevator. The crowd watched us. The courier girl in the dirty jeans and the billionaire in the bespoke suit. It was a tableau that would be talked about in Milwaukee for a generation. "Come with me." "Brooklyn," he said. I looked at him. I looked at the man I had shared onion bagels with. "I can't go up there," I stammered. "I am fired. I am banned." Everett smiled. It was the first time that day I saw the old Everett, the friend from the bench, peek through the billionaire's mask. "You are not fired," he said. "You are the only one here who is working." He leaned in close, whispering into my ear as I stepped into the elevator, his breath warm against the cold shock of the moment. "Do not be afraid," he whispered. "Tonight, we switch roles. You are not the victim anymore. You are the witness, and I am the judge." The elevator doors slid shut, sealing us in. The last thing I saw was Miles Kincaid's face, drained of all color, looking at the closed doors like they were the lid of his coffin. As the elevator began to rise, the silence in the car was heavy. I looked at my reflection in the polished brass of the doors. I looked like a wreck. My hair was messy, my face was windburned, and I was wearing a coat that cost more than my parents' house. Everett stood beside me, watching the floor numbers tick up. "I am sorry I didn't tell you," he said, staring straight ahead. I looked at him. "You are Everett Halden." "I am," he admitted. "Why?" I asked. "Why were you on the bench?" "Because I was dying." Brooklyn, he said simply, not physically. But my soul was rotting. I built this company, and I let it become a monster. I needed to see it from the outside. I needed to see if there was anything worth saving. He turned to look at me. His blue eyes were sad and tired. I found nothing until I found you. The elevator dinged. Floor 30, the executive suite, the doors opened, the hallway was quiet, plush, and smelled of lilies. It was the corridor I had walked down 1,000 times as a servant. Now, I was walking down it as a conqueror. Everett stepped out. He didn't look back to see if I was following. He knew I was. "We have work to do," he said. "Do you still have the box?" I touched the pocket of my jeans, where the folded photos and the notes were tucked against my hip. "I have it," I said. "Good," Everett said, pushing open the double mahogany doors of the boardroom, because in about 5 minutes, Miles is going to try to lie his way out of a grave. "And I need you to hand me the shovel." I walked into the boardroom. The long table was empty, the leather chairs waiting. The view of the lake was spectacular, gray and churning under the winter sky. I walked to the head of the table. I didn't sit. I stood there, waiting for the men who had destroyed my life to walk in and realize that the game had changed. Everett took the seat next to me. He didn't sit at the head. He gave that spot to me. He placed his hands on the table, interlaced his fingers, and waited. "Ready?" he asked. I took a deep breath. I thought of the cold nights. I thought of the hunger. I thought of Derek's laugh in the lobby. "I am ready," I said, and for the first time in a month, I wasn't cold. I was burning. The double doors of the boardroom clicked shut, sealing out the noise, the fear, and the frantic whispering of the lobby below. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the kind of silence that usually costs $1,000 an hour to rent. I stood at the head of the table, my hands resting on the cool, polished mahogany. I was still wearing the courier's jeans and the heavy men's wool coat Everett had draped over my shoulders. Beside me, the man who had introduced himself as a homeless wanderer walked to the window. He looked out at the gray expanse of Lake Michigan, his silhouette framed against the winter sky. "Sit down." "Brooklyn," Everett said, not turning around. I did not sit. "I am not sitting until I understand the terms of this arrangement," I said. My voice was steady, surprising even me. "You staged a scene in the lobby. You humiliated my husband. You terrified the executive board. That is theater. I do not do theater. Everett, I do compliance. So tell me what we are doing here." Everett turned slowly. A small smile played on his lips. It was a smile of approval. "I told you," he said. "I am looking for the truth." He walked over to the massive screen at the far end of the room. He picked up a remote and pressed a button. The screen hummed to life, displaying a complex network of server logs and financial flows. I did not go undercover because I was having a midlife crisis. "Brooklyn," he said, his voice sharpening into the tone of a CEO. "I went undercover because 3 years ago, the internal yield reports for Blackwell Harbor Utilities started showing anomalies. Profit margins were up, but maintenance costs were down. In the utility business, that is impossible. You cannot have aging pipes and lower repair bills unless you are lying." He tapped the screen. "I have a team of forensic accountants working out of a basement in Chicago. They are the best in the world at following money. But they are accountants. They look at a spreadsheet and see numbers. They do not know what a pressure valve looks like. They do not know the difference between a hydrostatic test and a visual inspection." He looked at me intently. I needed a translator. I needed someone inside the machine who understood the language of safety. I spent 6 months living on the street, watching the employees come and go, listening to the gossip at the dive bars near the office. I was looking for a leak, and you found me. I said, "I found the only person who was actually reading the reports," he corrected. "When you started digging into Project Ether, my system flagged your activity. I saw you pulling the raw data. I saw you challenging Miles. I knew then that you were the key." He slid a leather-bound folder across the long table. It stopped inches from my hand. "Open it." I opened the folder. Inside was a contract. It was thick, printed on heavy bond paper. The title read, Independent Compliance Advisor, Special Counsel to the Board of Trustees. I scanned the first page. The salary listed was 3 times what I had made as a lead. The authority level was absolute unrestricted access to all servers, physical sites, and personnel records. I want you to run the audit. Brooklyn, Everett said, not as a subordinate. As the lead investigator, I want you to burn the corruption out of my company, and I will give you the matches. I looked at the contract. It was tempting. It was vindication wrapped in legal text, but I closed the folder. No, I said. Everett raised an eyebrow. No, I am not your mascot. Everett, I am not going to be the heartwarming story of the courier girl who got her job back. If I do this, I do not answer to you. I answer to the regulations. I pushed the folder back toward him. I want an indemnity clause, I said, listing my demands with the cold precision of a woman who had nothing left to lose. I want legal protection against civil suits from the current board. I want a budget for third-party engineering verification independent labs, not BHU vendors, and I want the authority to fire anyone, regardless of rank, if they obstruct the investigation, even you. Everett stared at me for a long moment. The air in the room grew heavy. Most people who spoke to Everett Halden like that ended up escorted out by security. Then, he threw his head back and laughed. It was a loud, booming sound. God, I missed this, he said, wiping his eye. Honest competence. It is so rare. He pulled a fountain pen from his suit pocket, a Mont Blanc, that probably cost more than my stolen Audi, and scribbled on the margin of the contract. He signed it and pushed it back to me. Done, he said. You have total autonomy. Now, stop negotiating and look at the screen. We have work to do. I walked around the table and stood next to him. The screen was displaying a timeline of server activity for the night the fake pipe data was uploaded. Here's what my team found, Everett said, pointing to a string of code. This is the master log for the Project Ether database. On November 12th at 2 a.m, a user with root access entered the system and manually overwrote the stress test values. He zoomed in. The user ID was masked, he continued, but the IP address traces back to a secure terminal in the executive suite. The problem is, 5 different people have access to that terminal. Miles, the CFO, the VP of Engineering. We know the data was faked, but we cannot prove who typed it. Without a specific name, Miles will claim it was a hacker or a system glitch. He will sacrifice a lower-level IT guy to save himself. I studied the lines of code. I looked at the timestamps. November 12th, 2 a.m. I reached into the pocket of my jeans. I pulled out the crumpled, coffee-stained envelope that contained my box of truth. It looked pathetic against the high-tech backdrop of the boardroom, but it was all I had. I spread the photos and notes on the table. You are looking at the wrong log, I said softly. Everett frowned. What do you mean, you are looking at the data entry log? I explained, my brain shifting back into work mode. The entry does not matter. Anyone can type numbers. What matters is the validation. I pointed to a blurry photo I had taken of my screen weeks ago, in the BHU system. A safety report is not valid until it receives a secondary digital signature from a compliance lead. That is the failsafe. The system locks the data until I sign it. Everett looked at the photo, then back at the screen. So they used your key, he said. That is how they framed you. They said you signed off on the fake data, then leaked it. Yes, I said, but look at the timestamp of the signature. I tapped the screen. The digital signature, my signature, was applied to the document on Sunday, November 16th, at 4:15 in the afternoon. Everett looked at me. So they stole your password. I reached into my envelope and pulled out a piece of paper. It was a wrinkled receipt from a pharmacy in Kenosha, 40 miles away, on Sunday, November 16th, at 4:15 in the afternoon. I was not at a computer. I said, I was at a pharmacy in Kenosha picking up a prescription for my mother's heart medication. I had to sign for it physically. I slapped the receipt on the table next to the screen. The pharmacy system is linked to the state insurance database. It is a federal record. I cannot be in 2 places at once. Everett, I physically could not have applied that digital signature. Everett picked up the receipt. He looked at the time. He looked at the screen. "This proves the signature was forged," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "It proves more than that," I said. I walked over to the keyboard controlling the screen. I typed in a command. I knew the system architecture better than the people who built it. To bypass the physical location check of the two-factor authentication, the user would need to disable the GPS geofencing on the compliance server. Only 2 people in this company have the administrative privilege to disable geofencing without triggering an alarm. I hit enter. The screen flashed, filtering the logs by admin override. 2 names appeared. System admin root, executive override M, Kincaid. "There," I said, pointing to the line. Miles didn't just order it, he did it. He disabled the safety lock so he could paste my signature onto a document I never saw. Everett stared at the screen. The evidence was irrefutable. It wasn't just negligence, it was a deliberate, manual override of a safety protocol, traceable directly to the chief operating officer's personal credentials. He manipulated the geofencing. Everett whispered. He turned off the security system so he could rob the house. I nodded. And he did it while I was driving 40 miles away, creating the perfect digital alibi for himself and the perfect frame job for me. Everett turned to me. His eyes were shining with a fierce, cold light. "You got him," he said. "We got him," I corrected. "But Miles is just the hand. We need the head." Everett walked back to the table. He sat down heavily, looking at the papers I had spread out. He picked up the photo of the North Star Industrial logo I had found. "You were right about the shell companies," he said. "My team ran the trace you suggested on the bagel napkin." He opened a drawer in the boardroom table and pulled out a thick file. He placed it in front of me. "North Star Industrial is a ghost," he said. "No factory, no employees, just a mailbox in Delaware. But the money is very real. BHU paid North Star $180 million for pipes that do not exist. North Star then transferred 20% of that money to a consulting firm called Apex Strategic Solutions." I felt a lump form in my throat. I knew what was coming. I opened the file. It was a bank ledger. The beneficiary of the Apex Strategic Solutions account was listed in black and white. Derek Weller. I stared at the name. Seeing it on a government document was different than suspecting it. It was a finality. It was the mathematical proof that my marriage had been a money laundering operation. Everett watched me carefully. He didn't offer pity. He offered facts. Derek wasn't just taking kickbacks. "Brooklyn," Everett said softly. He was the architect of the financial structure. Miles handled the company. Derek handled the money. They needed a compliance officer who was distracted, or compliant, or dead. When you refused to be any of those, they decided to destroy you. I ran my finger over Derek's name. "He bought an Audi with this money." I whispered. "He bought the wine we drank. He bought the sheets we slept on." Everett leaned forward. "He thought you were weak. Brooklyn, he thought you were a supporting character in his story. He didn't realize that you were the one writing the book." Everett stood up and walked over to me. He placed a hand on the back of my chair. "You gave me your last coat on a frozen bench," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved me from the cold. Now, let me give you what you need more than warmth." He tapped the thick file of evidence. "I am giving you a level playing field. I am giving you the sword." I looked up at him. My eyes were dry. The sadness was gone, burned away by the white-hot heat of clarity. I closed the file. I placed my hand on top of it. "I do not want a sword. Everett," I said. I stood up, clutching the contract he had signed. "I want a gavel." I looked at the door. Downstairs. In the lobby. Or maybe in their offices by now. Miles and Derek were trying to spin this. They were calling their lawyers. They were deleting emails. They thought they still had a chance. "Let's go to the server room," I said. "I need to lock them out before they wipe the drives." Everett nodded. He pressed a button on the intercom. "Arthur?" The chairman's voice crackled back, sounding terrified. "Yes." "Mr. Halden, Ms. Turner is officially the independent lead investigator for this inquiry, Everett said, his eyes locked on mine. She speaks with my voice. If she asks for a cable, you give her the factory. If she asks for a file, you bring the cabinet. Is that clear, crystal clear? Sir? Everett looked at me. Lead the way. Ms. Turner. I adjusted the collar of the oversized wool coat. It felt like a judicial robe. We are going to audit them. Everett, I said, and we are going to audit them down to the bone. I walked toward the door, my steps echoing on the floor, ready to bring the ceiling down on the heads of the men who thought they could bury me. The euphoria of the boardroom lasted exactly 45 minutes. That is how long it takes for a lie to travel around the world, while the truth is still putting on its boots. I was sitting in a temporary command center we had set up in a conference room on the 32nd floor, 2 floors above the executive suite. A subtle power move by Everett. We had 3 forensic accountants, 2 cybersecurity specialists, and enough caffeine to kill a horse. I was staring at the raw data streams from the server, feeling the rush of finally having the weapon in my hand. Then my phone buzzed. It was not a text. It was a news alert. Viral video disgraced utility. Executive attacks. Husband in lobby meltdown. I froze. I tapped the link. The video had been uploaded to a popular social media platform 20 minutes ago. It already had 50,000 views. It was the footage from the lobby, but it had been surgically altered. It started mid-sentence, cutting out Celine's insults, cutting out Derek's smug cruelty. It just showed me. It showed me screaming, "I want my life back." It showed me crumpling the bill and throwing it at Derek's face. It showed me looking wild-eyed, disheveled in the men's coat, shaking with rage. The angle made me look dangerous. The audio had been boosted to make my voice sound shrill and hysterical. Below the video was a statement released by the BSU Communications Department, Celine's department. Blackwell Harbor Utilities is saddened by the continued harassment from a former employee struggling with severe mental health challenges. We are working with authorities to ensure the safety of our staff and her family. I dropped the phone on the table. It clattered loudly in the quiet room. They are fast, I said. My voice sounded calm, but my stomach was knotting itself into cold, hard loops. Everett looked up from a stack of legal briefs. He picked up my phone. He watched the video without blinking. He didn't look angry. He looked impressed, in the way a general is impressed by an enemy ambush. Standard playbook. Everett said, "Isolate the whistleblower, discredit the witness, make the narrative about your sanity, not their crimes. It is working," I said, watching the comment counter tick up. "Look at the comments. She looks psycho. I would divorce her too. They are destroying me." Everett, again. Before he could answer, the door to the conference room opened. A young man in a sharp suit walked in. He was one of the lawyers Everett had summoned from his private firm. He looked grim. "Ms. Turner," the lawyer said, "we have a problem." "What now?" I asked. "2 deputies are in the lobby," he said. "They are here to serve you with a temporary restraining order." I stood up. "A restraining order? From whom, Celine?" "From your husband," the lawyer said. "Derek Weller has filed an emergency petition claiming domestic violence. He cited the incident in the lobby, specifically the throwing of the object at his face, as assault. The order bars you from coming within 500 feet of him, his workplace, or your shared marital residence, my marital residence." I realized the strategy instantly. It wasn't about safety. It wasn't about the $20 bill. "The box," I whispered. Everett looked at me. "What box? I have a safe in the house," I said, my mind racing. "In the guest bedroom closet. It has the physical backup of my journals from the last 3 years. It has the original hard drive I used before they wiped my laptop. Derek knows it is there. He does not know the combination, but if he has a drill, the restraining order keeps you out of the house." Everett finished. "It gives him time to find the safe and destroy the contents." I grabbed my coat. "I have to go there. I have to get it before he does. Sit down." "Brooklyn," Everett commanded. His voice was sharp. "If you go there, you violate the order. The police will arrest you. If you are arrested, You cannot lead the audit. If you cannot lead the audit, Miles wins. Do you understand? They are baiting you. They want you to run to the house so they can put you in a cell for the night. I sank back into the chair. I felt trapped. I felt the walls closing in. It gets worse, the lawyer said. He hesitated, looking at Everett. Tell us, Everett said. We just received a notification from the district attorney's office. The lawyer said, Miles Kincaid has filed a formal complaint alleging extortion. Extortion. I laughed. It was a hysterical sound. I have $0. How am I extorting anyone? They are claiming you demanded $500,000 in exchange for not releasing fabricated safety data. The lawyer explained. They have submitted an email chain. Show me. I said. He laid a printout on the table. It was an email from my work account, the one I was locked out of, sent to Miles 2 days before I was fired. Subject settlement, body. I know about the pipes. Transfer $500,000 to the account below by Friday. Or I go to the press. Below the text was a routing number. I stared at the paper. I never wrote this. This is insane. It doesn't matter if you wrote it, the lawyer said. It matters that the routing number listed in the email belongs to an offshore account that well. We traced it. It is technically in your name, or rather, a shell entity that lists you as the beneficiary. My blood ran cold. They had set this up months ago. Derek must have used my passport, my social security number. He had built a trap door under my feet before I even knew I was walking on a stage. If the police link that account to me, I said, I go to prison. Not for leaks, for blackmail. Everett stood up. He walked over to the window. He looked out at the city he owned, the city that was currently being turned into a weapon against me. They are trying to bury you under so much mud that the truth suffocates, Everett said softly. He turned back to the lawyer. Get the bank records for that offshore account, Everett ordered. We have them. Sir, the lawyer said, but the beneficiary is Ms. Turner. Look deeper. Everett snapped. Who funded the opening deposit? Who pays the maintenance fees? Trace the IP address of the account creation. The lawyer shuffled through his papers. We did a preliminary trace. The opening deposit came from a holding company called Apex Strategic. Everett slammed his hand on the table. The sound made everyone jump. Apex, he said. Derek's shell company. He looked at me, his eyes burning. Do you see? They got lazy? Derek opened the account to frame you, but he used his own dirty money to fund it. He created the account that was supposed to prove you are a criminal, but instead, it proves he is the one moving the money. Everett turned to the lawyer. Take that directly to the district attorney. Do not pass go. Do not speak to the police deputies in the lobby. Go to the DA. Tell him that if he arrests my lead investigator on a frame-up funded by the accuser, I will sue the city for wrongful prosecution until the budget runs dry. The lawyer nodded and ran out of the room. Everett looked at me. They fired their shot. He said, now we fire ours. He turned to the tech team. I want to know who edited the logs, he said. Brooklyn proved Miles ordered the override, but Miles doesn't know how to code. He barely knows how to use Excel. Someone inside the system executed the command. Someone with level 5 clearance, the lead cybersecurity specialist, a woman with blue hair and tired eyes, spun her monitor around. We found it, she said. The command was executed from a terminal in the server room basement. Physical access. The biometric scan at the door logged the entry at 2:14 in the morning. Who, I asked. The specialist highlighted a name. Marcus Vance, VP of System Security. I felt the air leave my lungs. Marcus. Marcus was the man who had taught me how to read server logs when I first started. He was the one who sat with me in the cafeteria and complained about corporate overreach. He was the one who had sent me a text when I got fired saying, I am so sorry. This is unjust. He was the inside man. He is the eraser. I whispered. Everett nodded grimly. Miles gives the order. Derek handles the money, and Marcus scrubs the crime scene. It is a perfect triangle. Everett walked over to me. He placed his hands on the table, leaning in until his face was inches from mine. We have them. Brooklyn. We have the money trail. We have the log override. We have the frame up, but I want to hurt them. I said. The words came out before I could stop them. I was thinking of the video. I was thinking of Derek laughing in the lobby. I want to ruin them the way they ruined me. I want to leak the photos of Derek and Celine. I want to post the bank statements on the internet right now. No. Everett said. He didn't shout, but the words stopped me cold. No revenge, he said. Not like that. If you leak data, you become exactly what they accused you of being. You become a liability. You become a criminal. He grabbed my shoulders. We do this by the book. We use the law. We use the audit. We present the evidence to the board of directors tomorrow morning, and we let the weight of the truth crush them. That is the only way you walk out of this clean. Do you understand? I looked into his eyes. I saw the steel there. I saw the discipline. I understand. I said, but it hurts. I know. Everett said, justice usually does. He checked his watch. The emergency board meeting is set for 9 tomorrow morning. I have invoked the founder's privilege clause in the bylaws. They cannot cancel it. They cannot lock us out. Miles, Derek, Celine, they will all be there, and you will present the findings. He handed me a key card. Go to the hotel across the street. I have booked the penthouse suite. Security is outside the door. Do not check your social media. Do not answer your phone. Sleep. You need to be sharp. I took the card. What about the house? I asked. The safe. Let it go, Everett said. We have enough evidence without your journals. Let Derek drill into an empty safe. It will keep him busy while we sharpen the guillotine. I left the building through the loading dock to avoid the reporters who had started swarming the lobby. The hotel suite was luxurious, silent, and cold. I ordered room service but couldn't eat. I took a shower, scrubbing my skin until it was red, trying to wash off the feeling of Celine's gaze and Derek's betrayal. I stood in front of the mirror in the bathroom. The steam was fading. I looked at my face. I looked older than I had a month ago. My eyes were harder. There were lines around my mouth that hadn't been there before. I wasn't the compliance girl anymore. I was something else. My burner phone, the one Everett had given me, buzzed on the marble vanity. I stared at it. Only Everett and the legal team had this number. I picked it up. It was a text message. But the sender ID was blocked. If you step into that room tomorrow, you will lose everything again. We know about the incident in Chicago. We know about your sister. I dropped the phone. I backed away until my back hit the tiled wall. Chicago. My sister. No one knew about that. It was a sealed juvenile record from 20 years ago. A mistake my sister made when she was an addict. A mistake I had paid thousands of dollars to help bury so she could have a normal life. She was clean now. She was married. She had 2 kids in Ohio. If they dragged that up, if they painted my family as criminals, my sister would lose her job. Her husband would find out. It would destroy her. They weren't just attacking me anymore. They were holding my family hostage. I looked at the mirror. My reflection looked back, terrified. They knew everything. They had investigated me deeper than I thought possible. I sank to the floor, pulling my knees to my chest. This was the cliff. This was the moment Everett had warned me about. The moment when the cost of the truth becomes too high. I could walk away. I could take the $5,000 Derek offered. I could disappear. My sister would be safe. The pipes would explode eventually, but I wouldn't be there to see it. Or I could walk into that room. I looked at the phone again. The screen went dark. Tomorrow was the judgment, and I didn't know if I was strong enough to deliver the verdict. The text message about my sister was burning a hole in my pocket as I stood before the double mahogany doors of the boardroom on the 30th floor. It was exactly 9 in the morning. Inside that room sat the people who had stolen my career, my reputation, and my marriage. They believed they had won. They believed that a threat against my family's past would keep me silent, that I would take the $5,000 and disappear into the winter like a good little victim. I touched the door handle. It was cold metal. I thought about my sister. I thought about the life she had built. And then I realized something fundamental. If I walked away now, they wouldn't stop. Blackmail is not a transaction. It is a lease. You pay it forever. The only way to protect her, the only way to protect anyone, was to burn the leverage they held until it was ash. I pushed the doors open. The conversation inside died instantly. The room was full. The entire board of directors was present. 12 men and women in dark suits sitting around the oval table like a jury. At the far end, Miles Kincaid sat with his arms crossed, looking bored and confident. Celine Voss was next to him, tapping on a tablet, ready to spin whatever happened here into a press release. And Derek, my husband, was sitting in a chair against the wall, positioned as a concerned witness. He looked up when I entered. He saw my face pale, determined, unpainted, and for a split second, he smiled. He thought the text message had worked. He thought I was there to surrender. I walked to the empty chair at the head of the table. I did not sit. Everett Halden was standing by the window. He turned as I entered. He looked at me, scanning my face for fear. He saw none. He nodded once. "Begin." Everett said. The command was soft, but it hit the room like a whip crack. Miles cleared his throat. "Mr. Halden, before we start this performance, I must object. This woman is currently the subject of a restraining order and a criminal investigation for extortion. Her presence here is a liability." I didn't look at Miles. I looked at the chairman of the board. "Arthur, I am not here as a former employee." "Arthur," I said. My voice was steady, projecting to the back of the room. "I am here as the independent lead investigator appointed by the owner of this company, and I am here to present the audit findings regarding Project Ether." I pressed the remote in my hand. The massive screen behind me lit up. It displayed a timeline, a single, jagged line of red data points. On November 12th, at 2:14 in the morning, the safety stress test logs for the Sector 4 pipeline expansion were manually altered. I stated. Miles laughed. "We have been over this. You altered them. We have the logs of your digital signature." I pressed the button again. The screen split. On the left was the digital signature log, signed by B. Turner, Nov. 16/4/15 p.m. On the right was a scanned image of a pharmacy receipt. This is a receipt for heart medication, picked up in person at a pharmacy in Kenosha, Wisconsin. I said, "The timestamp is November 16th, 4:15 in the afternoon." I looked at the board. Physics is a stubborn thing. "Gentlemen, I cannot be in two places at once. I could not have signed that document because I was 40 miles away, standing in line for beta blockers." Celine spoke up, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. "Brooklyn, honey, we know you are confused. You could have signed it remotely. You have a VPN token." I turned to Celine. "I could have," I agreed, "if the geofencing protocol hadn't been active, but the system requires a GPS match for remote signing. Unless I hit the next slide, unless an administrator disables the security protocol." The screen showed the admin log. User M. Kincaid. Command disable. Geofence. Time Nov. 16/4/10 p.m. The room went deadly silent. Miles stiffened. His boredom evaporated. "That is a glitch," Miles snapped. "Or a fabrication. You have access to the servers now. You could have planted that." Everett stepped forward from the window. "We anticipated that defense." "Miles," Everett said. Everett pulled a small USB drive from his pocket and plugged it into the console. "The Blackwell Harbor server room is a level 5 security zone." Everett explained to the board. "It records everything, keystrokes, screen captures, and audio." He pressed play. The voice that filled the boardroom was unmistakable. It was Miles Kincaid. "Recorded 3 weeks ago. Just get it done, Marcus. Use her key. She is distracted with the husband. I need those pipes cleared by Monday or the stock takes a hit. Disable the fence, paste the signature, and if anyone asks, we blame it on her incompetence." Miles's face drained of all color. He looked like he had been shot. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This is illegal," Miles shouted. "You cannot record employees without consent." "It is not illegal." "Miles," Everett said calmly, "you signed the consent form when you took the job. It is in the fine print of the executive contract. Page 42. All activity on company premises is subject to monitoring." Everett looked at the board. "Your COO didn't just ignore a safety risk. He manufactured one, and then he framed an innocent woman to cover his tracks. Celine jumped in, desperate to salvage the sinking ship. Okay, fine, Celine said, her hands shaking slightly. Maybe Miles made a technical error under pressure. But that doesn't change the fact that Brooklyn is unstable. Look at the lobby video. Look at her marriage. This is a personal vendetta spilling into the workplace. Everett looked at me. It was my turn. It is not a personal vendetta. Celine, I said, it is a financial transaction. I changed the slide. The screen now displayed a flowchart of money. $180 million from BHU to North Star Industrial. North Star Industrial is a shell company. I explained. It has no factory. It has no steel. It is a P.O. box in Delaware. I traced the line on the screen. North Star transferred 20% of the contract value, $36 million, to a consulting firm called Apex Strategic Solutions. I turned to face the wall where my husband was sitting. Derek was gripping the arms of his chair so hard his knuckles were white. He wasn't smiling anymore. Apex Strategic Solutions is registered to Derek Weller. I said. The board members gasped. Heads turned to look at Derek. I walked over to him. I stood 2 feet away, looking down at the man who had promised to love me until death. You weren't consulting. Derek, I said softly, you were laundering. Miles approved the fake pipes. The money went to your shell company, and you took a cut for setting it up. Derek stood up, backing away until he hit the wall. That is a lie, he stammered. I provided strategic analysis. It was legitimate work. I pulled a piece of paper from my pocket. It was the printout of his bank ledger. Does strategic analysis usually involve a $5,000 cash withdrawal on the same day you offered me $5,000 to sign a separation agreement? I asked. I threw the paper at his feet. You bought the Audi with stolen money. Derek, you bought the lease on the apartment with stolen money. You didn't just cheat on me with Celine. You cheated on the law. Celine stood up, grabbing her purse. I didn't know about the money, she said quickly, looking at the chairman. I was just the PR director. I had nothing to do with the finances. I am a victim of Miles's manipulation too. Everett stepped in front of the door, blocking her exit. Sit down. Ms. Voss, Everett said. He nodded to me. I played the final clip. It wasn't audio. It was an email chain, from S. Voss to M. Kincaid. Subject: the wife problem. Body. Derek is on board. He will distract her with the estate planning paperwork so she doesn't check the server logs this weekend. I will prep the press release about her mental breakdown. We need to make sure she looks crazy before she talks. Celine froze. The email was projected 10 feet tall behind her. It was the undeniable proof of conspiracy. It wasn't a marriage, I said to the silent room. It was a heist. And I was the alibi. The chairman, Arthur, stood up. His face was red with fury. Enough, Arthur said. He looked at Miles. You are fired, effective immediately. Security will escort you to the legal department. We are handing all this evidence to the FBI. He looked at Celine. You are terminated for cause, and expect a lawsuit for defamation of character. Then Arthur looked at Derek. Mr. Weller, you do not work for us, but the police are waiting in the lobby. I suggest you don't make them come upstairs. Miles slumped into his chair, defeated. Celine started to cry. Loud, ugly sobs that elicited no sympathy from anyone, but Derek looked at me. He looked at me with eyes that were wide with terror. He realized that the restraining order, the threats, the blackmail, it had all failed. Brooklyn, he whispered, please, I can explain. It got out of hand. I did it for us. I wanted us to be rich. I looked at him. I remembered the man who had proposed to me in a vineyard. I remembered the man who had held my hand when my mother died. And I searched my heart for anger, but there was no anger. There was only a cold, vast emptiness. He was a stranger to me. He was just a line item in an audit that I had successfully reconciled. There is no us. Derek, I said, there never was. There was just you. And the money you loved more than you ever loved me. 2 security guards entered the room. They took Miles by the arms. They took Celine, and they gestured for Derek to follow. Derek looked back at me one last time as he was led away. "Brooklyn," he called out. "Who is going to take care of you? You have nothing." The doors closed, cutting off his voice. The room was quiet. The air conditioning hummed. The board members looked at me with a mix of awe and fear. They knew I had just decapitated the leadership of their company in 20 minutes. Everett walked over to the table. He picked up the remote and turned off the screen. He picked up a folder, the signed contract for the independent investigator position, and handed it to me. Then, he reached onto the chair next to mine. He picked up a coat. It wasn't my old men's parka. It was a beautiful, tailored camel hair coat. It looked warm. It looked like armor. He held it open for me. I slipped my arms into the sleeves. It fit perfectly. "You asked who is going to take care of you," Everett said to the room. Though he was looking at me, he buttoned the coat at my neck, his hands gentle. "No one needs to take care of her," Everett said. "She is the only person I have met in 10 years who knows how to stand on her own 2 feet. He stepped back. "The job is yours if you want it." "Brooklyn," he said, "Chief Compliance Officer, board-level authority, name your price." I looked at the contract. Then I looked at the window, at the city of Milwaukee stretching out below. I picked up the contract. I looked at Arthur, the chairman. "I will take the job," I said. "But my price is double whatever Miles was making. And I want a dedicated budget for community infrastructure. No more frozen benches." Arthur nodded quickly. "Done." I turned to Everett. "Thank you for the coat." "Everett," I said. He smiled. "You earned it." "Brooklyn." I turned around. I walked toward the double doors. I didn't walk like a victim. I didn't walk like a courier. I walked like a woman who had walked through fire and come out made of steel. I pushed the doors open and stepped into the hallway. The elevator was waiting. I pressed the button for the lobby. I was going down to the ground floor. I was going to walk out the front door. I was going to buy a bagel and onion bagel. And then I was going to start my life. My real life. Thank you so much for listening to this story of betrayal and justice. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening on your commute, at the gym, or maybe relaxing at home? Please let me know in the comments below so we can connect. If you enjoyed seeing Brooklyn take back her power, please subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button to help this story reach more people who need a reminder that the truth always wins.